shift at the diner. The night he panicked and begged me to say I was driving because he had a scholarship and everything to lose. I was 17 and terrified, and I loved my brother, and I believed him when he said he'd make it up to me forever. I'd been drinking at the party too, so I blew over the limit on the breathalyzer, and that was enough. I went through the courts and the guilt of being called a murderer when I wasn't even driving. I started drinking harder to cope with carrying a dead girl's name. George went to college on his scholarship and never looked back. And now he was making toasts about mistakes that follow you forever. I stood up. You want to talk about that night, George? Let's really talk about it. His smile froze. I didn't think you'd want to bring that up. You know what I think about every single day? Bethany Hollister's face, her parents at the trial, the way her mom couldn't stop shaking. George shifted. Maybe we should change the subject. But you know what I never did, George? I never drove that car. Dead silence. You picked me up that night. You were supposed to be sober, but you'd been at Derek's house for hours. I begged you to let me call someone else, and you said you were fine. George went pale. You're confused. You were wasted, and you don't remember it right. You ran that red light. You hit her. And when the cops came, you looked at me crying and said, please, I have the scholarship. Just say you were driving, and I'll owe you forever. My mom's voice was barely a whisper. George, what is she talking about? I was 17 years old. I loved my brother, and I have spent 10 years being called a killer while he built his perfect life on my silence. My dad stood up slowly. George, tell me she's lying. George opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Tell me she's lying. It was complicated. We had both been drinking, and I panicked. My dad's voice dropped to something terrible. You let your sister take the fall for something you did. For 10 years. She agreed. She said she would do it. I was 17 and you were my big brother. You've spent a decade mocking me while I apologized to that girl's grave every single year. I grabbed my coat. Bethany Hollister is dead because of you, George. They follow you now. I walk out, and the last thing I heard was my father telling George to get out of his house. I don't know if my family will ever forgive me for lying, but for the first time in 10 years, I'm not the only one carrying Bethany Hollister's name.